This is the Rome airport. I'm getting ready to travel to Tripoli for the first time. This is I think around April or May 1963, 64. Yeah, April, May 64. Alitalia was of course, national Italian airline, and it had most of the flights to Tripoli and other Italian former colonies. So now we're flying, approaching Tripoli, flying over what was a sort of a desert, but there were some ranches and farms that the Italian settlers or colonials who were still there. There were a lot of them still there in the 60s. When Gaddafi took over in, I guess, 68 or 69, he kicked them all out. But when we were there, there was still quite a few. This is the hotel that I wound up staying at the first night because the good hotel, the Libya Palace, didn't have any record of my reservation. So they put me up at the Del Mahari, which has kind of an interesting history. It was an officer's brothel during the war for the Italians, I guess, and then they converted it more or less to a hotel. It wasn't actually too bad. Not expensive. I think it was £1 35 piastres, about $4 a night, and it was along the coast there. That's the Mediterranean, which I think when the Italians were running the place was actually pretty well kept up, and was I imagine a nice looking promenade. Of course, when the Libyans took over, they don't know how to fix anything or repair anything or maintain anything, so it just crumbles and crumbles. It's kind of interesting, the lack of traffic in those days. Cars were not that usual, and they were kind of expensive, especially for Libyans. So traveling by Gary wagon, they were called horse carts, was a typical way to get around. Occasionally, when one of our cars would break down, or I guess when they were all broken down, we would take one of these Gary wagons to work, and that was always a lot of fun because when you got to your destination, the driver would then try to extort more money out of you, and when you refused, he'd typically throw the money down on the ground, stomp on it, and then a bunch of other Arabs would come running over and scream at you and so on as you walked into the office or wherever you were going. That was sort of one of the usual features of life in Tripoli for us. There were a lot of open air cafes. This is, I think, the main street, Sharia Istiklal. It was one of the side streets. A little filthy little kid playing in the dirt. You can see even here the walls are all crumbling, and no paint or things like that. Were a few people with boats. I think these almost certainly were all expats that had boats. And there were a number of motor scooters and small motorcycles, as well as cars and bicycles. They're typical Italian, probably widow lady walking along. I think most of the Italians there didn't actually have much money. I understand they were not exactly the cream of the crop as far as Italian citizens go. I understand a lot of them just came from the slums of Sicily and Napoli and stuff. And it was a way of Mussolini kind of getting rid of them without, or at least moving them someplace where they wouldn't cause as much trouble. that's probably an embassy with a guard in front. I don't remember exactly. This is along the main coast street there, I think. Probably down from the Del Mahari. There were some fairly nice beaches out of town. You'll see them later. One of the issues around town was I guess there was a huge drain where they dumped raw sewage right into the sea right by the town there. So swimming and fishing wasn't really the thing to do. This was the second best hotel, the Libya Palace, and after my first night, they found my reservation or got me one, and so I moved in there, which was much more luxurious by Libyan standards at least. And that was my room, relatively clean. A view from my window, I guess. I think this was quite a bit more expensive, as I recall. It might have been something like 20 pounds a night or something like that. So needless to say, the company wanted me out of there as fast as possible. I forget how many days they allowed me to stay there. It wasn't very many. Might have been a week or 2 weeks. That's the main church. Now it's a mosque, I understand. These are some of the people. I don't really remember who they were. They were other people that arrived about the same time as me. I guess I never saw them again. I think we're, oh yeah, we're on our way to Sabratha. This is one of the famous Roman ruins in Libya. Still an attraction, I understand. Again, I don't really remember these guys very well. They all. Oh yeah, one of his name was Chris. I remember. Yeah, E021. Yeah, that was a famous Volkswagen. Actually, it was originally owned by a guy named Rod Maniac. Yeah, there's another picture of Sabratha. In those days, it was, as you can see here. I mean, you just walked into these places. There was no controls whatsoever, and I'm sure a lot of the stuff got stolen as a result of that. There's probably a Libyan around someplace who wants you to give him a little bit of money, and he's supposedly looking after the place. But I think most of the time he just slept. Okay, so now there's Charlie Dortch. He's one of the other guys that arrived about the same time as me, and he's pouring himself, all of us, a stiff drink, which we consumed frequently there. Very little else to do for bachelors. This is Malta, I think. Yes, all right. Yeah, so I guess I spliced the. Actually, I'm not sure that is Malta. No. It was 40 years ago, after all. Okay, now that's Don Gray and Robin Hodgson, and they're all walking down the path from the flat that I think we were all sharing at that time. So this is a month or so later. Yeah, that's Robin, all right. Robin, and there's Don Gray. Don and his wife Janine, which is in some of the other movies, and Marguerite and I are still longtime friends. And that's Annie and Steve. Steve was another guy that I worked with in Midland, Texas before we both went to Libya. He was is a Colorado School of Mines graduate. A very sharp guy. who had a very focused plan for his life, and I think succeeded in retiring when he was 52 or something like that. And is now living in Australia, I understand. Finally got married after many years of being a bachelor, working in all over the world, actually, in Africa. I understand he was a pretty or very competent area manager and party manager and things like that. Ran a very successful crew operation everywhere he went. Was very highly regarded. In those days, of course, we were all just grunts. And that gal is Annie, and that's me for a second. With Don, yeah, there I am back again. And that was that was part of our lunch, I guess, at the beach. I think that's burying our trash. They didn't have any garbage collection, and certainly along the beaches there. I don't know if you can see it there. Some of those black spots are actually tar spots. Even in those days, they were exporting Libya. They'd be exporting oil from Libya, and there were tankers, and they would flush out their tanks after they unloaded the oil, or I guess before they loaded the oil, they'd flush out, or maybe afterwards too. They would flush out their tanks on the ships, and then some of the oil would come ashore on the beaches and stick to your feet. Didn't have an EPA in Libya there, or probably anyplace else, in fact. Yeah, that's our trash. All right, this was the dreadful bachelor apartment that Robin and Don and another guy named, I think, Wally something or another, Wallace Smith maybe. He was an Englishman, a really creepy one. There's Robin doing a little bit of housework, doing his laundry, which I'm sure needed it. Robin tragically died of cancer about 10 years later, I guess. He came to London when I was there and was actually a very highly regarded guy. And then all of a sudden he got ill, and after, I don't know, about 4 or 5 months died, quite young. And he was quite a clown. I'm not sure whether he actually had fleas or not. I think this was all just something to kind of make an amusing video. He got married. He brought his fiancee Gardenia to Libya, and they got married about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months after that, I think. Yeah, that's Wallace. I think Wallace Smith. And you can see even in this picture, Robin really didn't like him. That's a picture of Gardenia. She's quite an attractive lady, a very nice person. They had a nice family. Well, that's typical. I don't know if that was breakfast or not, but it was something we consumed a lot of. There was actually a pretty good local Libyan beer that was run by some Germans, I think. You didn't normally, a lot of the Germans that we met, there weren't that many in Libya, but the ones that we met, most of them had been there for many years, and they never talked very much about what they did during the war. And of course, it wasn't polite to ask. But they ran a good brewery, apparently. The beer was actually pretty good. It was really cheap. I think it was 8 piastres a bottle, which is about 25 cents or something like that, or maybe even less than that. So that's a villa being built. It's on the roof of the villa that Don, and it wasn't really a villa. I think it was more like a flat, an apartment. There's Don having probably breakfast. I don't know. It's probably after work, as a matter of fact. In those days, we worked actually 5.5 days a week. You worked from, well, it depended. They had summer hours, I guess, which was something like 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. 6 days a week, and then in the winter, I think it was maybe 8 a.m. to 4 or something like that, or 5. We had 2 hours for lunch, I remember, which was great if you had a family. You could go home for lunch and have a nice long lunch. If you didn't, like we were, it meant you had 2 hours of boredom. Very often we just worked through lunch because it was too much of a